Do you ever find yourself with a floating regard in your mind about your safety whenever you're outside? Whether you're at a mall, a movie theater, at school, or maybe even you're just shopping for groceries. No matter where you are taking a good risk of being a victim of gun violence. And that's just for being outside, doing normal errands or tasks in your life. Whether you realize it or not, gun violence in our country has become so normalized that it's become as common as brushing your own teeth. It is so common in our country that instead of being shocked when we hear about it, we just sigh in resignation and disappointment because of how much we see it happen every day. This silent acceptance, this assumption that it's just how things are, is perhaps the most dangerous side effect of crises that we have experienced, or at least witnessed every day. And it's what we need to challenge to change, not tomorrow, not next week, but today. We don't have to look far to feel the impact of this crisis. Think back to when our own campus, Ohlone, received a school safety threat recently. The main response was just an email, and we returned the next day to school like nothing happened. Then, barely a week later, there was a second, more serious threat involving someone on campus with a gun, which led to the school moving everything online for a week. When that happened, I was actually in my math class just finishing a test, and I was driving to my next class when it happened, where I was informed that the campus was on lockdown and all classes were canceled for the day. When I talked to my friends about it, you see, we were actually just joking about how we wish it happened just an hour earlier so we wouldn't have had to take the test. Thinking back, I realized that I had said this since I've experienced this exact scenario so many times that it has become so normalized to me, leading me to focusing on way less important factors of what happened rather to the fact that our own safety was at great risk. And I know I'm not the only person who may have felt the same. Getting even threats of gun violence shouldn't be normalized. It isn't normal at all to be at risk of being victim to gun violence, especially in places where you were supposed to be safe, where you go to every single day. My group and I have spent time researching the current state federal policies and how effective citizen advocacy campaigns have worked to influence legislative change. To combat the normalization of gun violence, my group and I have decided to try and present options and change of present gun laws, since clearly the current gun laws are not helping as much as should due to the fact of how common it feels like this crisis is, which we see in our daily lives, whether if it's us ourselves or the people around us. First, we will examine the dire need to address the high rate of gun-related incidents, making them almost common in our society. Second, my group and I will propose an actionable plan that we believe will help regulate the supply of firearms and increase accessibility costs, making it harder to access one. Finally, we will visualize the positive impact of the action on public safety and community well-being.
Gun violence in America has reached to a point where it no longer shocks us. It's become so common and repetitive that at this point we believe that's just unavoidable. It's just something we have to live with. According to the CDC, the United States faces more than 110,000 gun-related injuries and deaths every year. Hundreds and thousands of families are victim to this. For every one gun-related death, that's 2 gun-related injuries. Gun violence doesn't only affect the victim, but it affects the family and the community. Families are losing their kids. Kids are growing up scared, and businesses are starting to close early because they're scared of catching a bullet in their chest. Shootings happen so often that they barely hold our attention anymore. The Gale opposing view explains that shootings happen so often in schools, in malls, workplaces, public spaces that it just feels unavoidable. It's like bad weather, that's something you just have to live with. Gale's opposing view also reported that we live in a country now where children have to practice active shooter drills rather than normal fire drills. Thinking about that, we've become a society where we train children to hide from bullets because the government hasn't created any real solutions to stop them. Gun violence is only rising, and current gun regulations are doing nothing to stop it. Even when you look at the statistics, you're only going to feel more hopeless. The CDC cited by Gale opposing views that more than 44,000 people were killed by guns last year. To put that into perspective, that's basically the entire population of New York wiped out in a single year. Even though that's better than what happened last year, 2 years ago, overall gun violence is still higher than 2020. That means that we haven't gone back to normal. Gun-related homicides are over 15,000 deaths. Gun-related suicides are over 27,000 deaths. When one category rises, the other one dips. The U.S. estimate for gun violence is $557 billion in a single year. A statistic like that shows us that gun violence is not reducing, but it's getting much worse. Suicides with guns are one of the biggest categories. Even with the background checks, they prevent nothing. The Gale article, Gun Violence, states that more than half of the suicides reveal that gun violence is killing people even when there's no crime being committed. According to the CDC, there were 49,476 deaths in 2022 where gun-related suicides were related with guns, and more than 410 of them were homicides. CDC stated that more people suffer non-fatal injuries than die. Tens of thousands are victims to this violence. Gun violence is destroying our communities, families, and is leaving a big long-term damage that feels unrepairable. The future of victims, families, and peoples in the community is changing. Kids are growing up scared, and they don't know how to live a normal childhood anymore. Some kids don't even know what a normal childhood is due to the gun violence in their community. Now that we've seen how overwhelming the gun violence is, my team and I have come up with some solutions that will reduce gun violence in this country, even if it feels like the odds are stacked against us.
One of the biggest problems that we have in the United States regarding guns is gun trafficking. Gun trafficking has gone so out of control in the United States. Every single day, guns are imported between states in the United States. And these guns that cross between these states are actually imported from states with lower gun regulation laws, such as background checks. We need to stop gun trafficking because reducing the level of gun trafficking across states in the United States will lower and will make it harder for criminals and people who want to use them irresponsibly to obtain them. Reducing how many guns are imported into the United States for sale will cause a shortage in supply, making it harder for people to get their hands on them illegally. Implementing gun regulation laws will also help keep their firearms safely while following all the rules without taking away people's Second Amendment rights. According to Everytown for Gun Safety, criminals get their hands on thousands of weapons every day through gun trafficking. As you can see, 74% of trace guns that cross state lines came from states without background check laws, and over 1.3 million crime guns were recovered by law enforcement in just 5 years. The United States lacks strong federal gun trafficking laws to investigate illegal gun trafficking networks. We need to get Congress to pass gun trafficking laws to help keep illegal guns off our streets. If we create a shortage in the supply of guns sold in the United States, demand for them will go up. If the demand goes up, the price will also go up, which will make obtaining them illegally a lot harder. Another gun regulation law Congress needs to implement include environmental checks alongside background checks. Background checks have clearly not been able to reduce gun violence. As we saw earlier, gun violence has already been increasing and doubling by the rate each and every single year. According to Iwama Janice's examination into preventing gun violence, the Brady Act was implemented in 1994. The Brady Act was implemented to make it mandatory for background checks to be implemented when any time there was gun purchasing and gun sales. It is ludicrous and it is ridiculous that we as a country have been following the same policy for the past 30 years when it has clearly not been doing anything to reduce the gun violence in our country. It's been rapidly increasing throughout the years. One safety protocol we believe that can help us make a difference could be something like environmental checks as well, to understand who is around the individual who wants to purchase a firearm. Does he have children? Has his kids gone to juvenile? Is it safe to keep this weapon around this person who has kids? Should this person have a vault to keep it? Should he be required to keep it in a vault? These are all questions and these are all requirements and policies that are important when anybody is trying to purchase a firearm that is capable of taking someone else's life. Now that we've talked about what we can do to prevent illegal gun trafficking and also how we can implement laws like environmental check, let's look at how it would look like when these kinds of policies and laws are implemented and how it would look like in the future.
So, if we mobilize, federal action can be pushed towards a higher gun regulation. But if we don't, status quo that we have will remain as is. So, the federal gun regulation we have right now is inadequate, but the ones we are trying to persuade you to to push will help communities individually and also the nation overall. So, just a quick reminder, we want guns to be imported, to be reduced. We want that to be reduced. We want universal and environmental background checks, and we want safe storage requirements. So, the reason for that is because we want to prevent tragedies. Tragedies like what happened to David Grove, a game master, which is a person who basically makes sure everyone hunts with their proper licensing, make sure nothing goes wrong, make sure the rules are followed in hunting. However, in 2010, Chris Johnson killed and shot him, even though he had a hunting license, which gave him a gun. He was a convicted felon, because the hunting license in Pennsylvania never required a background check. So, if there was just a federal standard that we just put up, a person with a family, a person that lived, loved, he wouldn't have died that day. Even then, things like safe storage requirements, such as gun locks, would be able to keep children keep children away from guns. Teenagers, too, who are in like mental distress. It would reduce the amount of suicides that happen in the U.S. And it's not just, oh, these are numbers, right? Oh, less suicides will go down. That's good. But it's that these are people who have families that will grieve for them. And if we don't do anything about that, that tells a lot more about us than we like to think. But as well as that, gun violence will not just be based on an area. It will it will allow for a safety net with our provisions we provided. So, as we said about gun imports through states, Chicago, which has the highest gun laws, will be able to have a reduction of guns flown through by other less restricted areas because of our federal standards. And there's going to be a baseline protection that will help high-risk people, like people in domestic violence cases and people in crime-addled cities. Again, I want to let this be clear. Lives are at risk if we do not do anything about this. But, so, why is this going to keep on happening if we don't do anything though, right? It's because Congress will default to the loudest voices, which right now are gun lobbyists. Even right now, we have a lot of public support, but it's just there's no action being made to actually help allow for gun restrictions. We know this because in a 2018 Statista report, they made a poll which denoted the public opinion of gun control divided by residential areas, urban, suburban, and rural. And while places like suburban and rural areas had less amount of support for gun control, they still held the majority of what the people wanted, with urban being more than 50% and suburban and rural just being right below that. So, of course, yeah, we have public support, right? But the gun lobbyists, like the NRA, have been making laws to just hinder our ability to make that change. Such as when they lobbied for a law which forced victims of gun-related violence to not be able to sue against gun dealers and manufacturers when the guns they provided the aggressor. They made it so that you're not able to sue them for the harm caused by those guns, even if the guns they made were not given with proper checks or with faulty mechanics. There's going to be blood on the government's hand and by the bystanders who do nothing about it if we let this keep on happening. It's going to be an Ouroboros of violence and bureaucracy. So I just want to let you all know, if you want to help reduce safety, if you want to help reduce that, don't support. But if you do want to help increase our safety, reduce our fear, and increase, but not increase our complacency. Support these regulations. Yeah.
In conclusion, we have established that gun violence is an undeniable crisis that has been normalized as we have identified the federal regulation of gun supply, coupled with new types of safety protocols. Propositions like environmental checks are the necessary and feasible solutions in our eyes if we want to try and mitigate how much gun violence is caused. And we see how our society could be if we mitigate these alarming issues that have been rapidly arising for a very long time. Think back to the start of this speech, to the casual joking about a campus lockdown and the feeling of resignation that is just how things are. That feeling, that silence, is acceptance. It's the psychological cost of this crisis. It's what allows over 110,000 gun-related incidents and a staggering $557 billion in burden to continue unchecked year after year. We must allow the normalization of gun violence to continue to excuse the need for real systematic change. I challenge every person in here to commit 2 specific powerful actions today. First, search to sign a petition supporting the creation of strong federal gun trafficking laws to help close illegal loopholes. Second, take 5 minutes right now on your phone to write a concise email to your U.S. representative urging them to pass universal background checks and support limits on imported firearms. You can find their contact information quickly on the official House or Senate website. We deserve to walk into a mall, a movie theater, and especially our own campus with a floating regard in our minds about our own safety. Let us stop sighing in disappointment and start demanding change. Let us move past feeling powerless and instead use the most powerful tools we have, our voices and our advocacy, to dismantle the cycle of normalized gun violence and build a country where safety is an absolute guarantee, not a risk every time when we step outside. We're done.